All right, if you're on the Apple Podcast, have a nice walk. I don't know why I said that, bro.
That was the best thing we've ever recorded.
That's what happens when it's 8. What's up, Pushin Performance Fam? What's happening? Welcome to the show. As you can see, Phil's going crazy. I'm excited for this one. I'm excited for
Oh
people to
my
listen.
god.
We're talking periodization. It's not that funny, but it's gonna be a good episode. Tell them what they're about to learn.
My goodness, JT. Oh, great episode. We talked about what periodization means, kind of how it's defined in the literature, how we personally define it. We talked about where people generally go wrong with it, where we've gone wrong in the past, where we see coaches we work with go wrong, and we wrapped everything up with some solid practical recommendations that you can take and start to apply with your own periodization and planning strategies that you use. And as always, we answered y'all's questions from IG. Again, we still need a name for this segment. Please, if you have a name for IG questions, give us a name for IG questions.
Help
But
us out.
solid episode. Super excited for y'all to get into this one. Welcome back to the show.
Better.
Time to push some performance. We're getting better. We're getting way better at the pre-show clap. At one point on the show, we'll break down the origin of the pre-show clap and why it's important, but not today. We don't got time for that today. JT, how are you doing, man?
Doing good, man. Doing good. It's a nice evening here in the Bay. As you can tell, it's a little chilly, but
Bundled,
I look like this in the summer too. So I don't know.
I was gonna say that is your standard fit. It's weather agnostic. You could be anywhere in the world, and that's what you're getting off in.
Try to keep it the same, consistent.
I respect it. I absolutely respect it, bro. Yeah, I think we got a fun topic today. In line with our conversation on exercise selection, in some ways, this is a progression from that. So if you have not yet listened to episode 2 on exercise selection, we'll leave that in the show notes for y'all to dive into potentially first or maybe right after this. But hopefully, again, similar to that conversation, we ruffle some feathers, we get people thinking, maybe get a little bit of smoke, start a little bit of conversation potentially, because today we are talking about periodization. And I didn't think about how many times we're going to say periodization in this episode, but I'm afraid I'm gonna slip up on that word.
That's all right. AI will catch us. They'll help us out.
Yeah, they'll just fix the voiceover real quick. But JT, when you hear the word periodization, it really, and you can go any context with this, what are some things that immediately come to mind for you thinking about periodization?
It's scary. It's a lot of things I don't know, and it's like, shoot, I need to sit down and read some stuff. But no, I think when I hear periodization, at least as a young coach, I'm like, oh, all right, let me figure out. Let me look at the year, and let's see what the in season looks like, the off season, and let's do all that fun stuff. But now, I think it's just planning, right? It's a way to look ahead and plan accordingly to whoever's in front of you. So kind of changed, over the years, but all in all, principles the same of your planning, right?
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, no, I mean, you ain't lying that it can be scary. Even thinking about like preparing for this episode and just the amount of stuff we were kind of going back and forth on, and things that we were getting into for the first time, I was like, man, I don't know as much as I thought I knew about specific aspects of human adaptation, about specific origins of different periodization schemes and strategies. So it was kind of eye-opening to kind of go through this preparation process for the episode. But yeah, I think similar to you, I think about planning. And I don't think it's an oversimplification just to call it planning or like intentional planning, right? When you look back to the origins of it, which I think from Matveyev in the 80s was I guess when his original Russian text was transcribed to English. But we'll talk about periodization being like sequential right? And being about specific time frames that are like the best time frames for strength adaptations, the best time frames for speed adaptations, and it's kind of posed as somewhat predictable, or at least the our response was posed as somewhat predictable to training. And I think that's somewhat changed in recent years. And I think that the most recent definition I found was the planned manipulation of training variables, aka load, sets, reps, in order to maximize training adaptations and prevent the onset of overtraining syndrome, which is a mouthful, which to me is just kind of like planning. Right, like
Yeah,
just like you
essentially.
said, we're back to planning.
Right. Yeah, no, I think if you really look down at the text and see the historical data that comes from it, you could start to understand like why things were the way they were and
Mhm.
why things are the way they are, right? And
Yeah,
which we'll touch on in terms of like coaches and then young coaches specifically, and where we kind of falter within our own programming and planning. So excited to talk about that a little bit more.
yeah, bro. Let's get into it. But first, before we go super deep into where we went wrong, where we see coaches going wrong, and our current views on periodization and then practical takeaways. Let's start with how we learned, right? So when you think back to a much younger JT, no crow's feet, no wrinkles.
I wasn't smiling back then. That's why. Nothing to smile about.
No food, no laughter. He's just a young, hungry strength coach. What were kind of your origins of periodization? Like, how did you learn about periodization?
Yeah, that's funny because when we were looking at the notes earlier, I'm like, I don't think I learned it. I memorized, what periodization was, and I memorized what the textbook says.
Yeah, but I ain't
I was
learning.
trying to study for my CSCS, and I saw the words. I kind of had an idea of what things were, but I don't think I actually learned it to where I knew how to apply it to whatever individual is in front of me. So I read words that defined periodization and all the things that came with it, during college, and when I had to, be in front of some volleyball players, some basketball players, and understand how to plan,
Hmm.
for their specific programs to a degree, but never really understood it. I mean, I still don't. I still don't understand a lot of it now, but I do understand a little bit more of the principles, which
Yeah.
I think will matter the most. But essentially, in college, tried to study for it during the CSCS, and
Hmm.
um, kind of came in waves. You like that one?
I
And
like that
since
one.
then, so
I like that one. Just sneaking in a little sneaky reference right there. I appreciate that. Yeah, I feel like mine was similar. I had a teacher in college, Martucci. He was the wrestling coach. He was a psychopath.
what a name,
What a name!
Martucci.
Just ginormous guy. Always rocking cowboy boots, no matter what. Terrifying man. Long, slick back hair, strong as shit. He was like 55, and he was just like, "This is how you train."
Hmm.
Like, I'm not exaggerating. Like, he was literally like, "This is how you train." All right. You build capacity first, you do hypertrophy, you do strength, you do power, then you're peaking for the season. Like that, this is how you train, this is how you do it. He also was still hung up on the one set to failure on machine phase. He absolutely
Mm,
loved like the machine circuit where you just go and do like 10 plus machines, one set to failure, and each week you add 5 pounds or whatever, or try to add a rep or two. Like
I
that
love
was his
that.
bread and butter still. Doing that was so brutal. It was like one of the least fun things I've ever done in my life.
I call
Was
it the
that
hotel
workout?
workout. I love that.
You just get it in
Just
quick,
get it.
just get it in quick, and then you're. I mean, it's efficient. You check a lot of boxes. It's time
Knock it
efficient.
out. Just knock it out.
Get her done. But yeah, I think that was a big starting point for me. And then actually through one of my favorite weightlifters of all time, American weightlifting legend Kendrick Ferris. I've like ran some of his programs. I'm blanking on his coach's name right now. Legendary weightlifting coach from Louisiana, and it was at LSUS in Shreveport, Louisiana.
Hmm.
They had basically a weightlifting program that I followed, that I loved, that ended up, like, now looking back on it, dictating my program design for like years afterwards. But basically, they did sets of 10 heavy for 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Then they deloaded and did sets of 5 heavy. Then they deloaded and did sets of 3 heavy, and then peaked for a weightlifting meet.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, basically very, very similar model to, what we've talked about, like going hypertrophy, strength, power,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, and then like looking back on that, like any program I wrote after going through that myself was heavily, heavily, heavily influenced by that, because I was like, that worked for me. So
Right.
like, this is going to work for anybody, regardless
Right.
of what we're doing.
And you went through that too, right? So I think as a young coach, like whatever you do and the results that you get from
Yeah.
that, you'll see that's the way, which
Yeah.
is, how we tend to approach things. Oh, I feel the benefits. I see it.
Hmm.
I've done it. Now, let me preach that to everybody else because this is the way I got it. So you got to do it too,
Yeah. And
right?
that makes me think about, we were going back and forth. I can link the episode, um, on the Hit Science podcast, but John Kiely, who's been super critical of periodization, in the 2010s
Mm-hmm.
recently, he talked about path dependence, and it was the first time I'd ever heard the concept of path dependence. But essentially, like what you just said, like how I solved a problem now is going to dictate how I solve other similar problems moving forward,
Mm-hmm.
right? So essentially, our past events, decisions, programs, they constrain our future programs, decisions
Mm-hmm.
that we make around trainings, right? So me personally, I went tens, fives, threes, peak for a meet. That works.
Mm-hmm.
Now that becomes my framework for
Mm-hmm.
programming moving forward, versus like, well, maybe I'll try something different. And I think like in the episode, he was talking about how, humans, we like to think that we are open-minded, and we like to think that we're creative, when, when in reality, we're not that open-minded, we're not that creative, right? If my solution worked, why would I, from an evolutionary standpoint, seek a different solution? If this is the one that works, like, I'm just going to
Mm-hmm.
keep doing that.
Right.
When, what worked for me isn't going to work for you. And what worked for me isn't necessarily going to work for you, especially in the same way. And what worked for me isn't necessarily going to work for me again. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure like that's something you probably experienced in your own training and your own coaching as well.
Yeah. No, I think it that's what creates the dogmatic approaches to a lot of training, right? And I think of the word perspective within that. Like if that's the only thing you know, then that's the only thing you know.
Yeah.
Literally. Like if you're
Yeah.
born in a small village and that's no internet and that's the only people that's how they do the things. Why would you know anything else, right? And I
Right.
think just to kind of illustrate that point of that concept. What did you say the concept was again? It was a
Path dependence.
path dependence. I like that a lot. But no, overall, I think whatever we do, especially the programs that we follow early on, that's going to give us the solutions to everybody's problem, even though it was a solution to our problem.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. And that's probably a nice transition into, some other areas we've gone wrong, but also where we see coaches starting to go wrong, right?
Hmm.
And going a little out of order on our list, but
Hmm.
looking at, coaching coaches and coaches you work with in the past. And again, like for our context, we are mostly working with coaches who are creating programs for members of the general population,
Hmm.
right? So mostly, non-athletes, even though they still might be doing athletic things. So in that specific context, where are some areas that you see coaches kind of going left when they should be going right?
I think it's just that. It's just looking at it as a dichotomy. Like I'm either only training athletes or I'm
Mm,
training the gen pop, right?
yeah.
General population. And I think from there, you're picking two roads where it's literally the same road. Now it's just understanding the principles
Mhm.
to see how you can apply it. But so, speaking as a young coach, it's after I was training the volleyball and basketball and baseball players, I wasn't training athletes no more. So then I went to the corporate wellness space and
Yeah.
just went out the window because I wasn't training athletes no more. So I was like, all right, let's just do whatever because you're not an athlete. You're Gen Pop.
Like somehow
And
their biology's different.
yeah, you're not a human no more, so it doesn't matter. You're just coming to class and we're just training. So I think understanding that there's the human aspect of it, that's and not understanding, I guess, the human aspect of it is where coaches kind of go wrong, and then you start to pick A or B, where it's no, it's helping A and B, but now what
Yeah.
are you using to help them? So
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot within that, but I think it's just a matter of that understanding of distinguishing, you know, or you're giving yourself that dichotomous
Yeah. Like
issue, right?
you're putting like false constraints
Hmm.
on yourself for no reason.
Is that a word? Dichotomous? That is
Yeah,
a
yeah,
word,
yeah,
huh?
that's a word. You're so
I
concerned there
make
for
I
a
make up
moment.
words all the time, bro. So I'm like, and it sounds good,
It
you
sounded
know.
great.
It sounds good. I'm talking to my dog all the time. I'm like, wait, is that a word,
Is
bro?
that a word, bro?
He
You
doesn't
just
know.
you don't know. Damn it, Kingsley. No, but you brought up the human element, and this is something I've been thinking about a ton recently. But I think it's one of the things that personally I've gone wrong with, and I've seen coaches
Mm,
go wrong with. And like even looking 2 years ago, when I'm working with interns or working with younger coaches, I've discounted the human element when like the coach I was working with was right about it and had the better idea and the better plan. But I was, like you said, being super dogmatic and
hmm.
trying to stick to the quote unquote script or the quote unquote rules of these different periodization theories, right? So, like,
Mm,
what I mean by that is the human element being buy in, belief, relationship, stress management, all these things can either positively or negatively impact our response to the stresses of training in life.
hmm. Yeah,
Right. So like if I'm doing a program and I'm like, this is a kick ass program, bro. I'm gonna get so strong. I'm probably gonna get better results than if I'm like, this is whack. Like, why am I doing like why are we doing this shit? This is stupid. I don't want to do
right,
this. Like that's gonna 1000% significantly impact my actual adaptation response
right.
to the
Like
program. And it
your
could be the
your
same thing.
perception of the
Yeah.
actual program, right? That's a good call. I think now that we're talking through it too, a lot of if you look at the context of periodization, if you just search periodization in Google, to be fair, a lot of the context come within the realm of sport, right? So
Yeah.
that's all you see
Hmm.
of all the studies, and or majority of them anyway. So I think
Hmm.
looking back as a young coach, I'm like, okay, that's why I probably connected periodization to sport, and when I wasn't training anybody in sport anymore, I don't need to apply that, right? So
Yeah.
to the defense of the young brain, young coach brain, I think that's one reason I can see that.
Oh,
But
for sure.
yeah.
For sure. Yeah. And like even thinking it back to how we teach periodization, right? Like it's easier to teach the model and like not saying in a dogmatic way, but it's easier to teach this, set in stone plan than it is to embrace all this nuance and then be like, okay, here you go. Like make a plan. But if I'm like, hey, you know what? Let's start here. Let's start simple, right? We'll do a foundational phase. We'll do a little hypertrophy. We'll do a little strength, rinse and repeat. Like, let's just start here. And then, like, you can focus on coaching.
Hmm.
You can focus on building relationships. You can focus on, monitoring how people respond and seeing does this style of programming work, right? You can
Hmm.
learn along the way versus, you know, I hear a lot of people say periodization doesn't work. And I think that's probably just like intentionally hyperbolic. Like periodization doesn't it's not that it doesn't work, but it's not. There's no one size fits all. There's no one best way to periodize your programming. But that doesn't mean it doesn't work, right? So like, hey, this is just a roadmap. This is just a model. Like working with a new coach, I'm gonna give them a map first,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right? So
it's
they
a
can see
catchy
it.
title though for a paper.
It's so catchy. Like if we made a YouTube video right now saying periodization doesn't work, we'd probably get the most hits on it that we've got on a video. So
You
I'm going to do that. Yeah, I'm
you better
going to
be
do
like
that.
Snoop. You better be like Snoop. Love the smoke because that's what you're gonna get. You see that, you know?
Shout out Unc.
Shout out, played us. He played us, by the way.
That man out of
Um,
control.
lost my train of thought.
You
Lost
good?
my train of thought.
No, I think yeah, that's just like such a interesting road to go down. I get you have to play the game of social media and get eyes on your content, but it's definitely an interesting road for people to take to say that it doesn't work. And then like you said, like as a young coach, it makes things even more confusing, like even more challenging to learn.
Right, and that's why we're here, right? We're trying to not confuse anybody, hopefully, and we're here to simplify the confusing and complex topic. One of them being periodization, right? So, no, it's an interesting one, especially when you say, it doesn't work, because nowadays you can find any research paper to refute whatever statement that you have, and conversely, you can find a research paper to refute that one, right? So
Yeah,
if you look for it, you'll find it.
yeah,
But specifically with periodization, I think what for people who didn't read that paper, it's the nuance, right? It's the human aspect. It's the elements that you can't really measure, like your
mm,
perception of the program, especially if you're in an athletic training room, right? You got 20 athletes. You don't know how they feel about it. I mean, some of them might be hyped, some of them might be down, but ultimately, you can't not uh, dictate their individual response based off of a lot of factors that you can't control,
hmm,
right? And a lot of it's perception of that program, and somebody's not feeling it, somebody is, and you can't really see it or feel it all the time. So it's a matter of now what, right?
yeah, yeah. No, 1000%, 1000%. So like in a group environment. So now switching gears a little bit, starting to get into some practical advice. Like in a group environment, how would you start to think about periodization, knowing that, what you just said, there's going to be different individual responses based on, genetics, based on nutritional factors, based on sleep, based on psychological factors like perception, like previous training history, like likes, dislikes, like
Yeah.
there's and the list goes on and on and on. Knowing that a lot of people work in that group environment, how would you start to think about periodizing programming in that kind of constrained environment?
I think going back to like the problems that I see that coaches run into is going back. You see a gen pop versus an athlete, and then that means you either periodize or you don't,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
going back, you a lot of coaches just don't periodize,
Yeah.
right? Young coaches like myself before. So if you don't periodize, then you're not planning, and if you're not planning, you're just doing a disservice for whoever's in front of you,
Yeah.
right? So going to that point of within a group session of your general population in this context is okay, what do you plan for, knowing that they're not technically playing for sport, knowing that they might be playing some sports on the weekends, we're not, but they're not trying to peak, they're not getting paid for the sport that they're playing, and they're here to work. If you're in this um, context of a workplace, a corporate fitness space, they're there for an hour to feel better, to train with you, right? Whatever that is,
Mm-hmm.
it's understanding those variables. Now, as a coach, how do you plan around those variables, knowing that they're human, right?
Yeah.
So for me, if I'm looking at a group session, all right, if we're humans in the United States, look at the year, right? It's easier just to look at the year, annual plan.
Mm-hmm.
What's at the end of the year? What's in the beginning of the year? What's in the middle, and what's in the end? All right,
Yeah.
beginning is January. It's kind of cold if you're in in the January. So I think these factors, if you start to think about them,
Mm.
These are literally the variables that you can plan around for that year.
Yeah.
So if somebody's coming to your class, what are the variables that are actually something that you should appreciate, knowing that everybody's in that same spot,
Mm.
um, not necessarily having to train for a sport, but if you're in the same um, state, same building, all right, that's a variable that everybody shares, right? So I think just
Mm.
looking at that from that type of view allows you to create that plan for that group. But what are your thoughts there in terms of just general planning? And I'm just gonna start saying planning now, so I don't slip up. Hey, I won't get me on that.
You're not gonna catch me slipping.
Mm-hmm.
I love the note of like, let's think about just like the general timeline, like we would with an athletic population, right? Like the holidays, when people typically go on vacations in the summer. Um, depending on, I've worked in corporate wellness environments that was, um, like at an investment company, and during the tax season, everyone was slammed.
Mm-hmm.
So like I'm gonna manipulate my training to make it a little bit lower stress during the time when I know outside of training they're getting slammed with psychological stress, emotional stress, things like that.
Right.
Right. So those are great like things to keep in mind as you're training. And I think like what you talk about, like people just like not periodizing their program at all, or like we talk about not planning out their program at all, just doing whatever. And I think like it's an interesting thought for me, right? So just because periodization for the general population doesn't matter in the sense like it does for athletes, right? There's no one thing we're training for. There's no one season. There's no one competition that we're training for. And even in team sport, there's no one thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it's a long, grueling season that we're training through versus peaking for, and we hope that we can have our best athletes on the field and our best outputs during the championship, during the playoffs, during that peak competition season. But just because periodization doesn't matter for the general population doesn't mean you don't have to plan, right? And I can do almost whatever, right? Like I could do strength, hypertrophy, strength, hypertrophy, like I could do whatever with my program. It just has to make sense to their calendar to a certain degree, and then to how they're responding, right? Like I think like people take that as a way to be like, I'm just gonna do whatever. We're doing workout of the day, but like I want to plan something, right? I want to have a goal in mind, right? So when I look at the end of the year, we've moved whatever qualities you deem important forward in a meaningful way, and that could be different. Like for JT and I, we want people to stay athletic. We want people to jump higher. We want people to lift heavier. Like for other people, it might be more endurance based. For other people, it might be muscle mass based. Like
Mm-hmm.
whatever qualities you deem are important, right? You want to look back at the end of your year and say, cool, we've moved forward in these qualities in a meaningful way. And these things are important to my member. And I planned it in a way that didn't overstress them, that didn't set them up for failure in regards to injury or overtraining. Like I planned all this in a way that made sense for the person in front of me and their goal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the key word there that I think it's worth highlighting is stress, right?
Mm.
When we're planning, when we're periodizing program, we're managing the stress of the individual, right?
Mm.
Athlete or gen pop, whoever it is. You're managing the stress of their ability to lift load in the weight, right? Are we able to stress them out a little bit more in the beginning and then peak,
Mm.
and then if we're looking at game settings, if you're in season, probably don't want to stress them out too much because they want to play it. Ultimately, that's the goal,
Yeah.
it's for them to play better. If we take it to the gen pop, what are the stresses there, right? There's
Mm.
stresses at work, there's stresses at home. How do you manage that? Like you said, the holidays, it can be pretty stressful for some people, and I think
Yeah.
just appreciating who's in your class will allow you to understand how to manage that stress, right? And if we're looking at specific training, if it's tax season, if it's review
Yeah.
week,
Yep.
you probably don't want to overstress the system, because they're probably not going to come back, or they're not going to give you the type of you know output that you're really expecting.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I think just understanding the word stress and where what that looks like in your environment will allow you to start to plan out and look at those variables, right? That'll allow you to get to this goal for this group, person, individual.
Yeah. And like there's just like we talked about it a little bit up top, but there's just so much room for inter and intra individual variation, like between people in your class and then between people, the same person, at different times of the year or different times of their life cycle. Right. So I think we have to respect that to a certain degree as well. We were kicking back and forth conversation wise before the show about results from a study that I sent over. And it was like 585 young men and women. They strength trained for 12 weeks. And the average strength gain was 40 or 54%. So on average, they got 54% stronger. And I'm assuming this was in new trainees. But the magnitude of individual difference, like one person saw 0% change and one person saw 250% change, right? So like when you look, especially in a class environment, we talked about this in our boot camp episode, like we're taking a loss to some regard on the individualization of it, like knowing that we're generally going to get a positive response. But I still want to respect individuality, right? So hey, if it's like, hey, JT today, like, bro, you respond really well to heavy strength stuff and you love to do it. Like, hey, we're in a strength block. I want you to lose your mind. I want you to go so hard in this block. Like, get after it, dog. And like, my boy Kyle, he hates strength training. He hates back squatting. Maybe I give him a different movement. Bro, you can lunge. It's all good. Right? Like you think you're gonna get hurt doing that? Cool. You can lunge. And we'll over time teach you how to squat and show you that it's safe and you're not gonna get hurt. Right? Or like, hey, bro, you don't love hitting it hard in the strength phase? Sweet. Let's take 5% off. Let's take 10 pounds off this phase. Like you'll still get stronger, but it's just gonna be a different training response based on, your individual differences. Right. So we're starting to individualize within that group environment a little bit, you know, as best we can, given the constraints we have.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem that I ran into as a young coach, right? And you see these individual variances between your population. You see it from when you have 5 people in your class, and then also when you have 10, and then when you have 20. So at that point, as a young coach, I'm like, bro, that's too much to manage.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna throw everything out, anything out. If they get better, they get better, right? So
Yeah.
I think as a young coach, if that's me, you're talking to me right now, like, nah, I don't need to periodize, bro. They come when they want. I don't know. They might come in different ways. This person might not ever come ever again.
Yeah.
How do you coach me up as a
Mm.
coach to really think about still trying to appreciate the individual variances, even though I there's too much people, like I can't manage it. Like, how do you
Mm.
now start to shift that understanding that it's something that is still very important within the realm of training.
Yeah. And I mean, and similar to how I would talk about planning with an athlete or a client, right? Like working with a coach, I want to give them some autonomy in this conversation. I want to give them a seat at the table, a hand on the wheel, driving this discussion as well and driving this plan as well. So first things first, I want to know like what's the goal of your class,
Mm.
right? Like what is the outcome you want? Is it purely community and you don't give a damn about fitness outcomes? Like I don't agree with that, like just philosophically, but like
Why? What's
I feel
why
like
don't you agree?
I feel like I mean our training has to go. Your training should go somewhere, right?
Mm.
Like at the end of the day, we want to help people meaningfully improve in some sort of fitness metric. And again, like I'm not here to say what that should be for you. Maybe it's mobility, maybe it's endurance, maybe it's muscle mass, maybe it's strength, maybe it is rate of force development or elasticity, like or a combination of all those things. Like that's for you to decide. But at the end of the day, like just my personal philosophy, like I think training should go somewhere. in a meaningful direction, regardless of who you are, just so you can positively, one, like we get positive adaptation, we get better in a meaningful way, but two, I think it actually helps set us up for success from a overtraining and a variation management, a stress load management standpoint, right? If I come into the gym and every day it's something different, then like I'm not going to be able to adapt to that. And
Yeah.
I'm not going to have the ability to actually like recover from that adequately. So every day or every week, I'm just getting slammed.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just sore as hell all the time because I'm not actually like adapting to what I'm doing. So like to a certain
Right.
degree, like habituation or that repeated bout effect is like is a positive thing.
Mm-hmm.
Up until a point. Right. So it's
Right.
like, and also I'm always thinking about like learning movements,
Yeah.
and learning body positions, things like that, like learning how you move in space. Um so like I think that aspect of training is important. That comes from, progression, not doing the same thing, but like progressing things over time to a certain degree. So it's like
Yeah.
from a philosophical standpoint, I'm always like, we gotta go somewhere, right? Like two things can't be true. We can be entertaining, we can be a community, and we can also actually help people, like from a physical standpoint.
Yeah. I don't think it should be a personal philosophy. I mean, it's literally training, right? We're
Yeah,
all
yeah,
humans.
yeah.
We go to a class. I think that's another issue that I hear a lot with coaches is that mindset. You kind of get put into a box, like, oh, they don't really have a goal. They just want to get fit. And then if that's what you believe, then
Uh,
that's the only
yeah.
way you're going to approach it,
I
right?
promise you they have a goal. Like I promise you they have an actual goal.
We all have a goal, and
Yes.
even though they don't know what their goal is, I think as a coach we have to give them goals to shoot for,
Yeah.
right? I
Or they don't know
think,
how to voice it, like kind of like what you're saying.
yeah. And some truly, I've worked with a lot of clients who just they don't know what their goal is, but they know they have to work out. I think,
Yeah.
and at that point, okay, now it's time to educate, right?
Yeah.
And as opposed to just throwing the same thing, that gas gonna be crazy. That general adaptation syndrome, the gas will be too crazy where you're gonna be overstressed. So yeah, I think that's another call out there is as coaches we need to understand that they're here in front of us and they're looking for a coach to get them to where they want to be.
Yeah. 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 No, I mean 1,000%, right. And that's part of like the conversation, the building rapport, the building relationships aspect. So but yeah, back to your question about, how we handle a coach like that who isn't planning at all. Like we're just work out in the day in this thing every single day. Yeah. So first things first, like let's understand their like philosophy. Let's understand how they understand their members and the conversations, the relationships they have with their members. But then from there, it's like go almost starting from like a principles based approach. Like so, it's like again, let's figure out what the goal is, and now let's start to just sprinkle in a little bit of a plan. Right. So if I'm a new coach, I don't know what the hell is up, I'll give you a plan and you can mimic that. And then we can learn as we go. We can focus on coaching, like I said earlier. But then if you're already entrenched, like this is what you do, like what's the smallest worthwhile change? And it's almost like the same way I look at like habit formation in people like clients I work with. It's kind of the same way I look at education. Like let's
Mm-hmm.
make the smallest worthwhile change for this coach.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So all right, cool. Maybe it's hey, you do, every Monday, that's our lower push strength. Tuesdays, our upper pull. Thursdays, our lower pull. Fridays, our upper push, right? In our primary block. And we progress those 4 movements over, however many weeks you want to progress them. You change them, do it again. Change them, do it again. So your primary block is progressing in a meaningful way, right? You're planning it out, right? And we'll talk about how I view planning in a second, but we're planning it out, and everything else in your training is just like random shit. Okay, that's a start, right? We're moving it. We're starting to move in the right direction. So I think like that's kind of my thought process, and honestly, that's kind of how I even plan phases of my own training or phases of training clients that I work with. Like, hey, right now you really want some variation? Cool. like let's get hella variation. Right? And I'm gonna try to be intelligent about it. I'm gonna try not to slam you. You know, like
Mhm.
1 week we're doing 60 lunges, the next week you're doing 300. Like I'm gonna try to like monitor that spike
Mhm.
in training. But like, yeah, that's kind of I know it's long winded, but that's kind of my thought as far as
Yeah.
working with a coach like that.
No, that's a good call. I think the words minimum effective dose come to mind there.
Yeah,
Like the minimum effective dose is the maximum that you should be doing, because any more changes, you're probably going to go to a place where you're not going to get that effect that you're looking for, right? So
yeah,
I think as a young coach, it's a good call. Well, what is the one thing that we can start to
yeah,
manipulate here? And if it's just your training, I think planning. I think that's really the biggest issue. Like, can we get this person to plan? If they're not planning now, can we get this person to plan? And like to what you mentioned, they're they have goals, right? How
yeah,
do we understand that now? And it's not a personal philosophy, bro. It's a a component. I think a lot of coaches just need to understand how to incorporate within their philosophy. Is that fun
mm,
is important, community is important. The periodization is important. They're all very important.
mm,
Now, which dial do you need to just dial up a little bit more to ultimately get you a place of where you want to be?
yeah, yeah. And to the other kind of sub question within that of like, all right, I have 20 people in my class and some come in sporadically, what am I to do? And
Mm-hmm.
I think like with non-planning, you're kind of doing everyone a disservice.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're not really holding anyone down in that situation. Versus if I can plan my programming and act as if people are coming in, like what's the average? Or who's your ideal member? Like, are they coming in 2 days a week? Are they coming in 3 days a week? Are they coming in four? Like, whatever that is for you, let's just plan to that.
Yeah.
Knowing that like you're rewarding the people who are consistent, and the people who aren't consistent, like they're still getting the same varied training stimulus.
Right. And you know who the biggest disservice you're doing that for? Or the biggest disservice you'll be doing is for yourself.
Yeah,
You'll be running around with your head cut off, like, yo, what are we doing today?
yeah,
I hate that stress. Like, why would you want that stress on yourself? I think
yeah,
if you just plan ahead, you just easy. Now you can just focus on coaching, like being
yeah.
there, not shit. What are we gonna do today? You know?
And like to that point, if I'm planning ahead, now I can actually monitor how people respond to
Mm-hmm.
training. Like, and like I love subjective assessment, like whether it's an actual questionnaire or whether it's literally just a conversation. Like I can actually see how people are responding. So now I have more of an opportunity to individualize stuff. And you're like, hey, last week those lunges really hurt my hip. Or like last week those lunges felt great. I'm pumping the weight. I'm like, cool. Like let's do more weight. Let's do more sets. Whatever. Like let's individualize this program a
Mm-hmm.
little bit more now based on, okay, now I can start to see a trend a little bit over time versus like one off kind of experience. Knowing that, we lunge this week and I don't know when we're gonna see a lunge again because I'm just making shit up right now.
Right. Right. And I think to that point, if you stick on a schedule, people will, tend to come, right?
Yeah.
You can't really control what people do if they don't or they do come. There's a lot of factors that you can't control, but what you can control is you and
Yeah.
how you design that class or this program or this periodized plan, right? So if you create a plan, a lot of times it actually invites people to come in, like, oh, shoot, I didn't know I had this goal of doing a pull up, but now,
Yeah.
coach is giving me a progressions for pull up. So that's my goal now, right? So I think that gives them a sense of um, what's the word I'm looking for?
Like
Empowerment,
purpose or empowerment. Yeah.
empowerment, purpose to go now, right? Because if you don't have a plan, you're just doing stuff, and
Yeah.
that think metaphorically, that you're in life, you don't have a plan, you're just doing stuff, right? So as a
Hoping for
coach in
something
our
positive.
class, let's give them some hope, right? Let's give them some positive adaptations to shoot for.
I think that's like basically how I view periodization for the general population is just like
Hmm.
picking a goal and let's shoot for it. Let's get close to it. Let's get it. Pick another goal. Like, you know what I mean? It's like there there is no meaning to training for the general population. Like, we give it meaning as coaches. Our
Mm-hmm.
members give it meaning based on their wants and needs, right? Like, you define the purpose. They define the purpose. Like, I don't give a shit what Verkhoshansky said. Like, he wasn't training 20 people in a group class, right?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't have to go. Like, there's no best strategy. There's no
Mm-hmm.
best plan, right? You could do block, you could do linear, you could do that doesn't matter. What matters is having a plan, like having some form of a plan and
Right.
working that plan, right? So you like one phase, hey, we're crushing upper body, we're trying to get pull-ups,
Mm-hmm.
and like I'm not hitting lower body strength that hard. Cool. The next phase, I'm trying to get the highest box jump possible.
Yeah.
I don't know why I said that example, because we just talked about box jumps on another episode. But like, whatever, cool. The next
Right.
phase, I want to get a heavy dead. Sweet. Like, let's just work
Yeah.
the plan. Like, make a plan. Have a plan.
Right.
It doesn't like, you give it purpose. Your members give it purpose.
Right. And for me, like, I'm not trying to stress out. Like, I'm just trying to see what the best joke I can say for that class. And
Yeah.
the easiest way for me to do that is because I already planned, weeks in a oh, I can't even speak today. Weeks ago to now I already have what I'm on paper, what I want to do, right? What I need to do. And from there I
Yeah.
can just focus on coaching. Like, let me just make them
Mhm.
smile. That's the goal for me being there, right? But
Yeah.
I already had this plan of where I want them to adapt and the output that I want. So I think it's just it's a learning curve, right? It's just understanding where you are in your philosophy. What goals do you need to add now, and then understanding that how do we plan, right? How do we manage stress for this individual, this team, this group,
Yeah.
um, knowing that we're humans. Things
Yeah.
happen. Let's look at the year. Let's see how we can uh, bring the best service to this person in front of me or group in front of me. Understanding that there's variables that we should account for.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say, like, thinking about sport versus Gen Pop, my feelings of sport are pretty similar to how I feel about Gen Pop. Like, now it's just like, I don't want to say the qualities of the goals are more spelled out for us, but like, to a certain degree they are, or they could be. Like, hey, I know you need to get faster. Hey, I know you need to get better condition. Kind of based on your limitations relative to your peers, relative to your position. Like, I can start to get some of those answers. Like you said earlier, the timeline is more clearly defined. But again, it's humans. So
Mm-hmm.
like, does this person need a 3-week speed phase, a 4-week speed phase, a 10 weeks? I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how they're going to respond. So I need to figure that out, in working with them, in trying something, but I still need to plan. So like, I still think, like, I think some, what some call like phase potentiation, like doing strength and then power, could have, merit. Like, not trying to throw that stuff out, but it's not nice, neat 4-week phases all the time. Like, that's
Mm-hmm.
probably not what it's going to look like. It's probably not like deloading every 5 weeks. Like, it's more nuanced than that. But I still think, even with sport, you have to give it purpose as well, and then
Mm-hmm.
work the plan and kind of see how it plays out.
Yeah, that's a good call. I think just the principles of that,
Yeah.
right, is what we need to take away from. Like, okay, here's the adaptation we want. Leading up to it, what do we do? Right. And
Yeah.
if we look at, like we mentioned, if it's a high school track athlete, all right, track meets this date.
Yeah.
Here's the weeks leading up to it. Let's plan around that. If this is your Gen Pop, here's reviews. Here's going to be a very stressful time in their life. Let's lead up to that. Right. It might
Yeah.
look different in detail, but understanding that the principles of here's the goal, or here's the variable that we need to understand, and how do we work around that, right? And it's funny how uh, we see as athletes as Gen Pop, and we see them as very different human
Yeah.
beings, or at least different lifestyles. But like the other 23 hours probably look a lot very similar. Playing video games, they're on their phone.
Everyone's just playing video games.
They're
That's
sitting
literally what.
down, right? I was talking to my PT the other day, or a PT I had a conversation with, and he said something like, Yeah, I get a lot of athletes, but not for the reason that you think. Their wrists, their thumbs are like the biggest issue, and it's them sticks, bro. They're just
Bro,
going crazy.
I know my sometimes my wrist be bugging when I'm playing Call of Duty, and I'm like, damn, I'm really gripping. I'm out of control. I'm stressed out right now. I'm breaking this
That's
controller.
my excuse when I'm like, I'm just not helping the team at all. I'm just a 0, 0, 30. My thumbs hurt, bro.
Oh, sorry, bro. Thumb injury. I had to ice this real quick. I'm off for a game real quick.
But taking it back, it's like, yes, they're different in the sense of where their context of what their goal is, but at the same time, they're not. They're humans.
Yeah,
We still kind of do similar things. So I think if we start to unpack that in our head, it allows for a bigger range of possibilities and truly understanding of how to really plan, right?
yeah, yeah. Well, JT, if I may, lay out Phil's personal periodization prescription. I had to
The
tie it.
personal, the PP. All right.
I had to pause there so I didn't say all three of those words wrong. I tried to make it like an acronym like Joel, and then I gave up. But shout out Joel Sanders.
Hey,
He's just good. He's too smooth with his words. But okay, first things first. You gotta keep first principles in mind. Shout out Mr. First Principles himself, my dude Aristotle. That's my dog.
shout
Uh,
out Ari.
Shout out Big A. But the main first principles I'm thinking about are specificity, overload, and variation. And then from there, we're looking at have a destination, right? So like we talked about, our top-down planning, right? So have a goal in mind and understand the calendar roadmap. From there, we're guessing and checking, right? So now we're looking about bottoms up. I'm going to make a plan. I'm going to test how people respond, and then I'm going to make changes along the way. And then the last bonus piece is give your people, your athletes, your clients a hand on the wheel in the decision making process. So, real quick, going back to the top, unpacking this a little bit more. First principles, right? Like what makes a program go, right? What makes it work? What drives adaptation? So, specificity, I get better at what I do. So, if I want to get faster, I need to run fast. If I want to get stronger, I need to lift heavy things. Overload, our training has to get harder in some way over time. So, we continue to adapt. And kind of within that is variation, right? Like I can't squat 5x5 every day forever, right? I'm going to adapt to that, and it's going to stop having the same effect. So I need to have some variation, whether it's the sets, whether it's the reps, whether it's the loading, whether it's the movement. We need some meaningful variation. That's a double-edged sword, right? Because I can have too much, I can have too little in the variation sense.
Tough game. Tough
That's a
game
tough
to
game.
play.
That's a tough game. The tough game to play. And then from there, we're looking at the top-down piece, which I like how you explain it with the general population, looking at their calendar. But I need to have a goal. I need to have that destination. I need to have a loose roadmap. Like it's not perfect, but I have a general idea of how the training's going to flow, throughout the next couple of months, throughout the next year. I typically don't go that long. I won't go a year typically. But I want to know, hey, this quarter, what's happening? And then as I get close to the end of that quarter, next quarter, what's happening?
Mm-hmm.
Right? In my client's life, in this group, in this company's life, like what are the meaningful dates? And that's
Mm-hmm.
always in my mind. But I try to balance that with the bottoms up stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So like, how are you showing up every day? How are you responding to these movements? Right? What do you like to do? Right? Did you go like what is going on in your personal life? Right? Then I balance those things out and I'm not afraid to make changes on the
Mm-hmm.
fly. Like if I'm like, hey, this month, heavy strength phase. We're getting strong as shit. And everyone's like, yeah, nah. Okay. Like we make that change. Or if especially if I'm working with someone one-on-one, like, I'm not
Right.
afraid to make that change. And that makes it I always think back to like, old programs I ran. I'm in week 2 of 4 and I feel like shit. Like I'm getting slammed by this
Mm-hmm.
program. And I'm like, well, I got to do 4 weeks. Like, no, you don't have to you can change. If this is
Mm-hmm.
not going well, you can change. Like, you don't have to beat
Right.
your head against the wall and
Mm-hmm.
keep going. And then the bonus one of giving people a hand on the wheel or giving people some autonomy, I think like more and more is something I'm trying to think about adding in or trying to find ways to better add this in, especially in a virtual setting. But like, how can I better understand what people wanted to do, give them more choice, give them more of a guy like, hey, we just did a bunch of hypertrophy. What would you like to do next?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are you feeling? Right? Give them an opportunity to kind of dictate and decide. If you're in a class, give them an opportunity to vote
Mm-hmm.
on what phases are next,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or what primary movement is next, right? Because I think that only helps with buy-in. That only helps with purpose. That only helps with the whole psychosocial aspect of adaptation.
Right.
Sorry, I don't have an acronym.
We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. Yeah, I think I like how you place principles first, just because if we look at the aspect of giving autonomy or not being afraid to change certain things, you don't know how to do that unless you understand the principles, right? If
Yeah.
I'm thinking back as a young coach, like if you tell me to change something in a program, like what do I change it to? It says squats. I'm
Yeah.
squatting.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like what's the principles? Understanding the principles of your plan will allow you to give yourself that autonomy, right? To create the changes and ultimately appreciate that human aspect of like these are the variables, these are nuances that we'll have to play, day to day, and that they'll change. But ultimately, it comes down to okay, stick to your principles, and you'll be fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Literally, like that is the barrier to entry.
Yeah,
Like, can this box always be checked?
yeah,
And if you could do that, then like good things are probably gonna happen.
yeah, yeah, for sure. But let's land the plane real quick, Phil. You gave the thoughts. The we're gonna get accurate for that.
We're
We'll
gonna get
we'll,
an acronym.
we'll hit up Joe. We'll hit up Joel,
You need that.
the master acro. Thinking about periodization. What's how can we start to think about that as coaches, um, both in the athletic setting, the general population setting, the PT setting, whatever it is? How do we start to think about that to help ultimately help us as
Mm.
a individual?
Yeah, I think we got into a lot in this episode, so hopefully people are getting some good nuggets depending on where they're at experience wise and understanding and periodization wise. But I think more and more recently, the thing that's helped me the most is thinking about any model of periodization, right? So whether it's like a Bond or Chuck model, whether it's daily undulating periodization, whether it's conjugate or some sort of West Side version of conjugate, whether it is triphasic, like whatever, like all of those things. Again, there's no best. They all work in different contexts, but like they're just models. They're just guidelines, right? And you can use whatever one makes sense for you, for your setting, but know that it is a loose guideline. So hey, maybe Cal Dietz says you should do the eccentric phase for 3 weeks, but you run it for 5 and get great results. Cool. You know what I'm saying? Like, use those things as guidelines and try to learn along the way of what you're doing. So that's
Mm-hmm.
for me is like the biggest advice I can give a coach is don't take those models as law,
Mm-hmm.
but like let's like don't take out your brain and put in that model. Like let's keep your brain in your head and let's think critically about how are my athletes or my members responding,
Mm-hmm.
right? Am I assessing subjectively how they're doing? Am I kind of maybe doing some sort of objective measures, like maybe I'm doing like a plus set, maybe I'm doing VBT, checking bar speed, maybe I'm doing jump monitoring, whatever. Like, am I just seeing in some way how people are responding? Because that matters more than what someone said in a book, but the book is a great starting point.
Yeah.
So I think for me, that's the biggest takeaway I've had recently on this kind
Mm-hmm.
of whole topic periodization.
Yeah, I like that. I think that in combination with understanding that it's a way to manage stress, right? How
Mm.
do we manage stress of the group, the individual, and we can go in a whole rabbit hole of what stress means, but
Yeah.
ultimately, whatever you perceive is a type of stress. It would be you're under a bar for a lot of load, or it's your dog's yelling at you right now. It's crazy. That's a type of stress, right? So I think, how do we as coaches understand how to manage the stress of the group? And we can look at it from a quarterly or annually type of setting, and ultimately it makes your life easier. It makes my life easier just to plan,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And I'm lazy in that sense of like, I don't want to think about it and be
You're efficient.
stressed out myself
That's
that
efficiency,
day,
bro.
right? Yeah, be efficient. I guess that's a better word. Not lazy.
That's
I
all
just like saying
efficiency.
that. It's fun to say. I'm not lazy, but how do we be efficient and literally just plan? It makes your life easier. It makes their life better.
Hmm.
And if they don't have a goal, understand what their goal is. if you, I challenge everybody. If you have a member and you think they don't have a goal, ask them right now. They say,
Yeah.
I don't have a goal. I will give you $10 via Venmo right now. They say, I don't have a goal, a specific goal,
And they
right?
mean that.
And they mean that.
Oh,
But
I love it.
this is good.
I love it.
This is
Should we
good.
go IG questions?
What's our? I guess we don't have a cool name for it yet.
I was gonna say like IGQT. I don't know what the Q. I don't know what the T stands for. I don't know. It doesn't feel right saying it out loud.
Figure it out.
We'll
We'll
figure it
figure it
out.
out.
We'll figure it. We need a name for the IG question segment. Well, what do we got? What do we got questions wise today?
The Curious Georges. How about that, bro?
The Curious Georges.
All right. First question. Shout out Daniel. Daniel V. What would you say the most challenging thing is for young coaches? And what would
Mm.
you say to help?
Yeah, I said I was gonna go off a dome with this one since I have a bunch of thoughts rattling around in my head. I think personally, what I think the most challenging thing for young coaches is they don't know what they don't know yet.
Hmm.
Right. So whether it's like a full blown Dunning Kruger effect where they think they know everything when in reality they have no idea what they don't know yet, or they like legitimately are just kind of like, you know, curious and unsure, and they're again they're just new to the field, right? So there's so much information, there's so many resources, so many things that they haven't even had the time to get their eyes on yet, right? So for me, I think the best advice I can give a coach like that is just tell them to be patient. Now I wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
just say like be patient, right? Like we
Chill.
could chill, chill the hell out, bro. But I think like understanding the fact that like this is a journey, like your career is a journey, right? Like I thought I knew everything 10 years ago, and looking back on it, I didn't know anything at all. And now I feel like I know nothing and I know a lot more. And that's just kind of, when you're on this, path of quote unquote mastery, or trying to get, trying to become a master at your craft. That's just, how it flows. But yeah, and I think also ask for feedback. And I wish that's something I did when I was younger. But like again, you don't know what you don't know yet. So you don't really know your strengths. You don't really know your weaknesses. You don't know holes in your understanding of anatomy, of physiology, of stress, of of infinite things in this human performance space. So for me, it's being patient, asking for feedback,
Mm.
whether it's from a coach, a manager, a colleague, a friend, a member, an athlete,
Yeah.
whoever. But
Those are
what do
good.
you what do
Those are
you
good.
what were yours?
That's hard. Asking for feedback is very, very difficult
Oh
in a lot of settings. So that's going to
yeah.
be an interesting one to kind of dig into. But there's a lot of ways. I mean, a lot of things that I can think of top of my head, and I'm just thinking about what you were just saying. Still, I think what I hear the other day was the stupidest person in the room is the one that doesn't know they're stupid, right? If you don't know what you don't know, like you're at the point where okay, now it's finding a way to uncover that. Like the more you learn, the more you don't know. That's literally why the career effect exists. Like
Yeah,
as
literally.
you start to learn about things, there's a lot more that you need to unpack and then um, understand a little bit more. And you'll never understand it, but I think you'll just start to create this realm of like, oh, there's a lot of things I need to understand. So I think going back to that, it's I'll kind of shift the other way around. As a young coach, a problem that I see a lot is first the words I.
Mm.
I like to do this exercise. I like to do that. I like to squat. I like to bench. I like to uh, do animal flow. I got to stop picking on powerlifters. I like to do animal flow,
Whoa,
right?
whoa,
I
picking on
like
a
to
whole new
do
community.
maces, right? I like to. It's
Chill. I
that
was super into maces for a minute there. Chill out.
I'm talking to you then, bro. So get your mace bell, uh, and I think it's that if you approach your training um, in that type of vernacular and verbiage of what you like to do, then you're gonna not help that person. I think that's what it comes down to, right?
Mm,
And I think as young coaches, when you get into the industry, a lot of coaches, I don't know, there might be a different uh, population now, but early on, you hear like, oh, I got into personal training because I like to work out. I like to train.
yeah. Yeah.
That's great, but ultimately, it should shift into you like to help people, right?
Yeah.
It's not, hey, I like to train, so I'm going to show you what I like to do. It's, hey, what do you need and how can I help you?
Yeah.
Right. And I think it goes back to our conversation of periodization. You have to care about the people in front of you,
Yeah.
the individuals, because if you don't, then you're not gonna plan.
Yeah.
You're ultimately not gonna plan. If you don't care about them, you're not gonna plan. So are you at that point where you understand you're a coach, right? And the people that come into your space, you're there to help.
Hmm.
And I'm pretty sure a lot of people care. I'd hope a lot of people care,
Yeah.
especially if you're listening to this episode or this podcast in general, you care. So how
Exactly.
do we understand that, and how do we continue to keep that as our principle that we should live on, right? We got to care about the people. Okay, from there, good things will happen.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. Or and even with that, like, or at the very least, like, you can still love training. Like, that can still be your
Yeah.
purpose, but like, understand that what you like isn't necessarily what everyone else needs, right? And like, yeah, those biases are always going to creep in, but like, try to fight that bias as much as possible. Like, just because you're an endurance athlete doesn't mean everyone needs to train like that. Just because you love maces doesn't mean everyone needs maces.
Mm-hmm. Unless that's like your specialty and you have like a mace gym and people come to you for that, then okay.
Yeah,
Then
different.
that's something. But still, it's a how do we shift that? Like still like training, but understand that you have to care about that person. Truly understand like you have their lives in your hands.
Yeah,
Let's go to a fun one. Let's go to a fun question.
let's get it.
Shout out Jim. Shout out
Hey,
Jim.
shout out my boy Jim.
Who's faster, me or you? JT or Phil? What's
I'm curious. I'm curious to see what you would say, but I'm gonna say me, no question.
I'd agree.
Wow, no pushback.
I mean, you've literally been training for linear speed for the past 4 years, bro.
You'd
I'd
hope
hope
it'd
you're
be.
fast. I'd hope you're faster than me.
I hope you're doing something over there, bro. Shit.
I'd hope you're faster than me. I mean, fast or quick?
What are you talking about?
Am I quicker than you? Can I move laterally a little bit more efficiently? What do you think?
Ah, I don't know, bro. I've been playing hella tennis. Maybe though. You've seen me
Okay,
slip up
that's
a couple
fair.
times though, so I don't know.
That's fair. I think laterally, I might get you.
That's fair.
I might get you, but linearly, you better bolt. You better be bolt right now because you've been training for so many years for that, bro. That's great. It's great.
Do your thing. Listen, all I know for sure is I'm faster than Jim. If there's one thing I know to be true on this earth, I'm faster than Jim. For sure.
Did that race happen already?
No.
Okay.
We're just gonna
Well,
kept pushing it off.
we
Just
have to build it up now.
building
We got to
hype,
build
building
it up.
animosity. Yeah, one day. And it's gonna be beautiful.
We'll build it up.
Just two old guys running on a high school track. Call the police.
It better be like a 10-year periodization plan, bro. 10 yards max, please.
All this effort to get hurt running a 40.
40's too long. That's like a marathon at
It's so
once you're my
long,
age,
bro.
bro.
It's so long. Holy shit. I ran a 60 and I thought I was going to die. Everything on my body was on fire. I was like, what just happened to me?
I'll be running on my heels on the 20-yard line. Chill.
Marathon pace.
Why are you speed walking?
Bro, I'm sweating. Chill. Mold. Oh my goodness.
Wow.
Well, JT, hey, another good one of the books. Hopefully, people got some good nuggets from this. Where can the listeners of the show find you?
On IG, CoachJT.mp3.
Hey,
What about
let's
you?
go. You can find me on IG at Nashville. You can find the show on Instagram and video episodes every Friday on YouTube at Pushin Performance. That's Pushin No G, real G's, move in silence. So Pushin Performance on Instagram and YouTube. As always, if you love the show love how you supposed to. Please leave your boys that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th 5-star review, or 5-star rating and a review. Show them a little love. Tell the people why you like the show. And if you really love it, share it with a friend, share it with a colleague, share it with someone who needs to level up their coaching game. But as always, keep pushing, baby. Catch y'all next time.
See ya. Be smooth.
Rock with my feel, burning in the heat, roll, get a rock with my